Okay, so now that it's 3 p.m., let's get started with this webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shihan from New Venture Corporation. We are the organizer of the webinar today. Welcome aboard. So Philippines has been one of the hottest solar market in Southeast Asia for the past decade. And based on this most recent national renewable energy program, Philippines government is planning to increase its solar PV deployment and boost its solar power capacity. Regarding to this market focus during this webinar, speakers will give their opinions and interpretations on unlocking the emerging solar plus storage market development in Philippines. So now I would like to go ahead and give a brief introduction of and a big welcome to our speakers for today. They are Mr. Gary Gao. He is a technical manager, SEA from Sungrow. Mr. Dennis Quintero, the partner of Quinsamping Torres. And last but not least, Mr. Ari Natividad, the president and founder of CA Global Partnerships. So for today's webinar, we will first start with a 15-minute plenary speech given by Mr. Dennis Quintero from Quinsamping Torres, following by another 15-minute plenary speech given by Mr. Ari Natividad from CA Global Partnerships. And last but not least, Mr. Gary Gao from Sungrow will present a 20-minute plenary speech with the topic of BESS grid ancillary service and RE firm solution. Also, we will introduce the winner of the lottery session after the panel discussion. So please make sure to stay to the end and to see if you have won the prize sponsored by Sungrow. So the organizer of today's webinar, New Venture Corporation, is dedicated to supporting key investors and developers for successful development and investment in Asia-Pacific renewable energy sector. Our footprints cover Asia-Pacific countries such as Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, China, Myanmar, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and some Middle East countries. So before starting the webinar, I would like to introduce all attendees with some housekeeping notes. If you experience any technical issues or have any questions for our speakers, please use the below Q&A box. And also, we will share the webinar recordings with you by next week through your registration email. So now let's welcome our first speaker today, Mr. Dennis Quintero from Quinsamping Torres. Let's welcome. And Mr. Dennis, please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you so much, Shihan. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me share my screen with you. Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to join the panel today with Gary and Ari on the subject of unlocking the emerging solar and storage market development in the Philippines. My special thanks to our organizers, Neo Venture, for inviting me to speak in today's webinar. At the moment, the power sector in the Philippines is in the spotlight due to what you probably have heard are the recent rotating power interruptions in the Philippines. Today's topic is quite timely as the country is looking at renewable energy, including solar, to address the insufficient energy supply in the Philippines. My presentation will aim to cover the following subject matters: a discussion on the current landscape of solar energy in the Philippines, a growth forecast for the solar sector, as well as challenges, opportunities, and trends. Okay. Based on available data from the Department of Energy for the year 2018, renewable energy accounted for around 30% of the total Philippine generation capacity. However, this percentage came largely from hydro and geothermal power plants. Solar and wind comprise only around 21.88% of the renewable energy generating capacity and 6.6% of the total generating capacity. As of 2019, solar had a 0.18% share in the total primary energy supply. In 2020, prior to what we call in the Philippines as the Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ, it's another term that we use for varying levels of lockdown. So the ECQ started around March 2020, and prior to the ECQ, solar comprised 1.6% of the total generation mix, while during the ECQ, it rose to 1.8%. In terms of awarded projects, there are 216 solar power projects, including own use projects, meaning that the user generates its own power. This slide shows us the solar PV installed capacity from 2011 to 2019, which would show a big jump from 2015 with around 165 megawatts to more than 920 megawatts in 2019 in terms of solar installed capacity. The DOE, in order to encourage the development of renewable energy, has issued a number of circulars and one of which is the circular that encourages building owners to install renewable energy power supply systems whenever technically possible. So this would include installing solar PV supply systems, which would reduce the demand for commercial power. This slide shows the awarded solar projects as of December 2020. And we would note that in terms of potential capacity, so these are broken down into the three major island groups in the Philippines, which are Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Luzon is leading in terms of potential capacity, while Visayas leads in terms of installed capacity. In terms of the awarded solar projects, own use solar projects, again, these are projects where the generation company uses its own power for its own projects. Luzon leads in terms of potential capacity, while Visayas is leading in terms of installed capacity. Now, moving on to the growth forecast on solar energy. The Department of Energy has prepared a Philippine energy plan for the period 2018 to 2040. And based on this PEP or Philippine Energy Plan, by 2040, it is projected that the Philippine energy mix will consist of 22.6% for renewable energy. And there's also a forecast that the Philippines will need an additional capacity of around 43 gigawatts by 2040. Now, in terms of annual growth, you will see in this slide that for the period 2016 to 2026, with a base year of 2020, the growth rate, the compounded annual growth rate, is estimated at around 13.4%. Okay. Solar has cut costs tremendously through economies of scale, as you all are probably are aware of it. In 2019, solar modules are 80% cheaper compared to their prices 10 years ago. And prices are expected to fall even further by as much as 59% by 2025, which would make solar the largest source of cheaper power. Moving on to challenges, opportunities, and trends that I have observed in the Philippines. The amount of mergers and acquisitions activity that I have seen in the Philippines, both with respect to ground solar and rooftop solar, as well as the development for the financing of solar farms in the last 3 years, is an indication of the great interest among investors and players in the solar market in the Philippines. The threshold question that is normally faced by a prospective entrant in the Philippine solar market is the question about the foreign equity limitation of 40% on a solar project company. While this is one of the challenges that an investor faces, we have seen a number of Philippine solar projects, both ground and rooftop projects, that have successfully proceeded to development or obtained project financing. And this goes to show that there are project structures that lenders can get comfortable with. And one of the important items, or one of the important aspects that a potential investor would need to ensure when doing business in the Philippines in the solar sector would be finding a suitable Philippine local partner. Another challenge, which it's of course can turn into an opportunity, is that millions of households in the Philippines still do not have access to electricity, and a further 200,000 receive unstable and unreliable power supplies. So in many cases, these households are either not connected to the national grid, or they would rely on diesel power generators. So an opportunity is present with respect to the building of microgrids, and the government is indeed promoting the development of microgrids, which would be autonomous grids that can operate off-grid or can connect to existing grids. Another challenge in the Philippines is its vulnerability to natural calamities. Thus, energy facilities and infrastructure often suffer adverse effects from these calamities, like strong typhoons. One of the measures that's being promoted by the Department of Energy to strengthen resiliency is the adoption of what's called the solar-powered emergency shelter solution, as well as resilient solar energy solution for calamity susceptible areas project. So these are essentially evacuation areas or emergency shelters that would make use of solar power to provide the power to the victims of natural calamities. So in terms of trends, one important trend that is noteworthy is that in the Philippines, there's now a framework for corporate power purchase agreements. So large corporate electricity users with an average monthly consumption of at least 500 megawatt hours can enter into corporate power purchase agreements with what we call the retail electricity suppliers. So these are normally companies that are also affiliated with the large power producers in the Philippines. And in one power purchase agreement that I worked on, the off-taker was a large business process outsourcing company. Um, as you may probably aware, the call center business or business process outsourcing is a very big sector in the Philippines, and some of these BPOs have employees numbering in the thousands. So, say, of course, they would have significant requirement for electricity. And in one corporate PPA that I've worked on, one such large BPO company entered into a corporate PPA with a retail electricity supplier that is affiliated with one of the conglomerates in the Philippines that are active in the power sector. Another trend that can translate into an opportunity would be the regulations that have been issued by the Department of Energy on retail electricity portfolio standards. So these are already in place. There are regulations applicable both for on-grid and off-grid areas. These retail electricity portfolio standards require electric power industry participants to source or produce a specified portion or minimum portion of their electricity requirements from eligible renewable energy resources like solar. So as I have earlier mentioned, we've seen a substantial amount of mergers and activities in ground and rooftop solar projects and companies in the last 3 years. And in some of these cases, in many of these cases, we've seen that it is the major energy companies who are previously focused on oil and gas that have ventured into solar power projects, both ground and rooftop, in pursuit of their objective of net zero emissions, as well as their strategy to diversify from the traditional oil and gas into renewable energy. Another very favorable development in the Philippines, and we are now moving on to the topic of energy storage, as well as the promotion of manufacturing for PV panels in the Philippines. A very welcome development is the recent change in the policy of the Philippine government that seeks to promote the mining and metal sector to, and I'm quoting the language of the executive order signed by the Philippine president on this change of policy, where he states that he is expecting this change in policy to usher significant economic benefits to the country and stimulating countryside development. So this new policy basically states that the national government is going to promote the mining sector, and that the new so there was a moratorium, there was a long moratorium lasting for around 9 years on new mineral agreements. So no new mineral agreements were signed during that period. Now in 2021, the Philippine president lifted that moratorium that would pave the way for new mineral agreements to be entered into, and generally a more favorable environment for the Philippine mining sector as far as the regulatory environment is concerned. So what is its relevance to the renewable energy sector? The Philippines is rich in copper, gold, and nickel. So these are materials that are used in solar power systems, specifically copper and gold, and battery storage, specifically nickel. So the development of the Philippine mining sector, as well as the encouragement of the government for downstream processing of minerals, could potentially result, under the right conditions, in the availability of materials that will ensure supply and bring down the cost of the manufacturing of PV panels and batteries in the Philippines. So there's already a PV panel manufacturing. There are already businesses in the Philippines that are involved in PV panel manufacturing. But then, with respect to batteries, this new policy of the government, and assuming that the private sector would take advantage of the opportunities in the Philippines, this could create a whole new sector of battery manufacturing, including utility scale, in the country. So just some infographics on the use of the metals that are prevalent in the Philippines in renewable energy projects. So as an example, copper. Copper is commonly used in solar technology for heat exchangers, wiring, and cabling. The advantages of copper is in terms of its conductivity, ductility, efficiency, and recyclability. And it's worth noting that the generation of power from solar and wind has a copper usage that is normally 4 to 6 times more than its use in their use in fossil fuels. In terms of gold, another metal that is prevalent in the Philippines. So gold is used in solar panels to increase PV efficiency. And then in terms of nickel, so it's said that if Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia is number one in terms of, if you think of Saudi Arabia when you talk about oil, it's said that the Philippines would be the equivalent of Saudi Arabia in terms of nickel. So indeed, the Philippines is one of the most richly endowed countries in terms of nickel. It is neck and neck with Indonesia as the largest supplier of nickel ore to China. And as you are probably aware, most of the battery chemistries make substantial use of nickel. And it's because nickel has several advantages. It requires less space. It provides longer life, better energy storage, and it's also a lighter material. Nickel batteries that contain nickel, and as you see in the slides, there are different types of chemistries. But nickel offers the highest energy density in the market. So as the nickel content in batteries increase, also the energy density also increases. So there is because of the expected increase in the number of electric vehicles, it's forecasted that there will be a substantial increase likewise in the demand for nickel. So even for storage systems for solar energy, nickel-containing battery technology plays a key role. The U.S. Energy Information Administration released a 2018 report which stated that nickel-based batteries represented during that time around 10% of the installed power and energy capacity of large-scale energy storage applications. As mentioned, nickel provides certain advantages, including delivering higher energy density and greater storage capacity and at a lower cost. So it is expected that the role of nickel in batteries and storage system will further increase, and that's why there is now a concerted effort of battery makers to secure the supply or offtake of nickel. And when we talk about nickel, you look at certain countries that are rich in nickel. So that would be countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, as well as New Caledonia. And further advances in the nickel-containing battery technology. So there are new battery chemistries that are being developed, but they would still contain nickel as a component because of the advantages that we have mentioned earlier. So one interesting case study would be the project of Toyota with JERA, which is a joint venture between Tokyo Electric and Chubu Electric Power. So they're targeting to transform old batteries that are used in electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles into power storage system for renewable energy. So these storage systems that they're developing will make use of the lithium-ion battery and nickel metal hydride battery from the aforementioned EVs and hybrid vehicles. So the system that they're developing is expected mainly to be used for storing electricity generated by power plants using solar, wind, and other RE sources. Another interesting case would be that of Tesla, which has entered into a partnership with the nickel mine in New Caledonia to secure more nickel resources. So as previously discussed, nickel is used in the production of EV batteries. And companies like Tesla, as well as other battery manufacturers, have entered into tie-ups with mining companies. In this case, with the Tesla, became an industrial advisor to a New Caledonia mine that's owned by the Brazilian mining giant Vale. So, as mentioned, that there is now a realization of the battery manufacturers that they need to secure their supply of nickel. And countries like the New Caledonia and as well as the Philippines and Indonesia, which have the one of among the largest nickel deposits in the world, are now currently being tapped into by these battery manufacturers. And they are looking at not only securing the supply, entering to offtake agreements, but also looking at setting up downstream processing plants in the country where the nickel is sourced, for example, in the Philippines. There are I'm aware of battery manufacturers that are looking into going into joint ventures with nickel mining companies to process nickel ore into battery grade materials. So the Philippines, which is one of the world's largest nickel deposits, is now looking to develop the nickel sector, including the building of downstream nickel processing for battery grade materials. That is the end of my presentation. I now turn you over to Shihan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Dennis, for your informative sharing. And in the meantime, should you have any questions for our speakers, please do also feel free to leave your message in the below Q&A box. And now let's welcome Mr. Eric Natividad from DA Global Partnerships. He will be the next speaker for our webinar today. And I will go ahead and share the screen on behalf of Mr. Eric Natividad.
Thank you, Shihan, and thank you also, Dennis, for your presentation. That was very informative. I'll be speaking about the commercial side or the commercial scale and industrial scale of solar plus storage in the Philippines from the perspective of me and GA Global, my company, as a renewable energy developer in the Philippines. So I'll just wait for, I think Shihan, there you go. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we have found as developers in the Philippines, and this is more of a drill down versus what Dennis has explained, no? Which is sort of a utility scale or the industry as a whole. This is more of a niche for the commercial and industrial side. So what we have found is that who are the people or who are the entities that need solar plus storage? So we have found that these are mostly the companies or people who are reliant on diesel. Mining companies, Dennis mentioned that as well. We have remote islands here, like resorts, hotels, and government facilities. So obvious islands, there are Palawan and Mindoro. Food processing, tuna canneries and fisheries in Mindanao. These are all have operations and locations that are dependent on diesel fuel. So you would see either they have their own generators that use up diesel for their own operations, or they have the large barges that use bunker fuel or diesel, or the electric cooperative is supplying them with electricity but using diesel or bunker fuel. Next slide, please. So basically, diesel is very expensive. In US cents, it's 31 to 52 cents per kilowatt hour. Just to give you a comparison, it's about 18 to 25 pesos per kilowatt hour. And then here, our retail, what we pay for retail in Metro Manila for residential is about 10 pesos. So this is almost twice and sometimes more than twice as much. As mentioned earlier, electric cooperatives use diesel and sell it to the retail customer, and they can. There are a lot of areas where they can only supply 4 to 6 hours of electricity per day. So those areas are being stopped from being productive or developed because of the lack of energy or stable energy. And also, obviously, the supply capacity is below demand. We have to import these things. So this is basically what the diesel plays. As for the energy mix, it's a little bit small. As Dennis also mentioned earlier, we have hydro and geo mostly on renewable mix. Next slide, please. So what I want to discuss next is a basic case scenario of an actual client of ours, so that for the audience can maybe understand an actual the development project here in the Philippines for solar plus battery. So we have a client who has a unique problem. So their problem is that they have retail electricity. They have it Monday to Friday. They only average at 250 kilowatt during weekdays. But because of the nature of their business, they need 2 to 3 megawatts of additional power every weekend. So that's a gigantic jump from their daily needs to a sudden 2 to 3 megawatt of additional power for weekends and some quarterly events. So what they do right now is they have 2 large diesel generators in their building. They need to purchase diesel at a high and fluctuating price. So this is a bane for them, and this has been a problem. They've been doing this for years. They cannot forecast their costs, so that's another problem for them. And then the price gets higher and higher, and then there's no stable supply. They source from different kinds of sources, so there's no permanent solution where they can just have electricity. Next slide, please. So that's the case scenario, and then we offered a solution of a solar plus ESS, no? And our solution basically is that, hey, we'll put up a solar system on your area, and then we'll put up a battery system. We'll use the solar to charge the battery, and then you can use the battery in your weekends. So there's a lot of different models how we can do this. First of all is the most obvious, which is you put it on the CapEx side of the client. You want to sell the system to them, and they can operate it themselves. You can teach them. You can teach them how to do it. We found out that this model is not so popular because solar plus ESS is very expensive. And then the client also, they're not aware of the technology. They don't want to take the risk of managing the technology and these things. No? So we offered the different models as well, which is a build, operate, transfer, wherein this is no CapEx. We come into the client, we build the system for them, we operate it, we transfer it after 5 years. By that time, they'd have the knowledge of the system and they know how things work. And another kind of sub option for that is like a lease model or deferred payment model, which is basically anywhere from 10, 15, 20 years. Now, this is where we basically have sort of a PPA with the client and then have that discounted from the rate that they're buying diesel. So if they're buying at 15 pesos, maybe you can have a PPA at 12. If they're buying 18, maybe you can have a PPA at 15. Something like this, the client still saves money, the developer still gets an ROI on the system, and everybody's happy. Next slide, please. But having said that, you know, there are challenges within this, the solar plus ESS, and we found that. First of all is the design. So we had to look outside the country for a designer to size the system. We have engineers here, but this is not a simple thing to do. You are designing solar plus ESS versus a generator or diesel generator. So you have to know a lot of things like their load profile and all these things, which is very different from a grid-tied solar. The crank on of plugging in things into a solar plus ESS, you have to measure that as well. So there are a lot of technical things going on there. Also, there's still a lack of standard economics in the market, meaning if you look at these storage pricing, you will still have different prices. You will have different kinds of products out there, which is as good and bad. We still don't know what should be like the standard IRRs for these projects, LCOE, all these things, because of the differences on the systems itself. So meaning you can have a 1 megawatt system, but you need a 1 megawatt storage as well. That's going to be different in terms of every project. Also, the lifetime of batteries, we have seen it's you have to replace them at some point. Usually it's at 10 years, so there's another cost there. Also, lack of clear policy in the sense that you get any benefits from pushing batteries or getting rid of diesel. What if we go into Palawan or Mindoro and say, hey, we can get rid of all this diesel? Can we come in and do batteries? Is there some sort of benefit for that? Corporate taxes, you know, maybe even a FIT or something like this. But this is being studied, I'm sure, by the DOE, and we've had conversations with ERC as well. I think their technical working group is doing studies on this as well. Next slide, please. So last but not the least, we want to end on a good note. There are a lot of strengths of solar plus storage. This is proven in other countries. So I understand that Tesla is powering an entire island in Hawaii through solar plus storage. Battery pricing is in a downward trend, still a little bit expensive, but a downward trend, which is good. There are many suppliers to choose from, which is good. It's always good for the market to have a lot of products that we can choose from. We know that it is cheaper than diesel. We already know that because we have an LCOE, we can forecast the pricing, all these things. And I think the most important thing here, and this is especially for the Philippine market, is that the market actually prefers green solutions. So there was a study lately that from the fast-moving consumer goods industry, wherein 75% of Filipino consumers actually prefer to purchase some sort of eco-connected product or eco-friendlier product. So that's a very big surprise, and that's on consumer behavior level. But also on a community level, there were case examples about a couple of years back where there is a certain coal project in a province, and then the locals, together with the church, rallied together and tried to stop the environmental clearance compliance of a coal project and all these things. And the same goes with the DOE moratorium on new coal projects. And the same goes lately, Asian Development Bank also put up some sort of news release saying that they won't fund or they won't loan into new coal projects. So there's market sentiment there. There's an acceptance of the market. And as the earlier presentation mentioned also, there was a downward trend for solar because in solar panel pricing and systems, because the market accepted it. There were feed-in tariffs all over the world. And that's why the price of solar maybe 6 years ago from 1.5 per watt is now at 55 cents per watt. So we see that trend also happening in batteries. And goes on the market sentiment, it's basically, these things like solar plus battery. These are things that affect all of us, not just the Philippines, but the entire world. So I encourage everyone to participate in it in wherever, however you can, through residential, through your company, or through lobbying in your own local governments. So thank you for that, and I'd like to close with that. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Ari, for this informative presentation. And now I'm going to stop my screen sharing, and let's welcome our last but not least speaker for today, Mr. Gary from Sungrow. Let's welcome.
Okay. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today my topic is green salary service and renewable energy frame solution. It includes the 3 parts. The first part is about opportunity and challenge. In past recent years, we know many countries such as the United States, Europe, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, many countries that all make promise at 2050 and they will achieve carbon neutrality. Actually, last year, and China also make a promise that before 2060, and China will achieve carbon neutrality. So according to the prediction of many institutes, and they also think at 2050, the renewable energy generation will occupy more than 86%. So it means that this is a huge opportunity for us. It means that the renewable energy generation will gradually dominate the energy source. For Philippines, and from this diagram, I think maybe we can see so far the renewable energy penetration is not very high. But I think just a huge potentiality in Philippines. And we can see from this diagram, and we can see in the past years, and the installation of wind farm and solar farm are growing very quickly. So I think there's a big opportunity. So, but for the big opportunity, I think it also brings some challenge for us because you know the renewable energy is not stable because it's easily affected by the natural condition, you know, as you know, because so it will bring some impact for the green, as I said, like the uh, frequency fluctuation, the voltage fluctuation. So how we are gonna address these issues, and because we believe and in future more and more renewable energy will connect with the grid, and how we are gonna address these problems. I think maybe some developed country give some solutions that maybe we can refer. And you know, currently in United States, in Europe, and many countries that they request that the renewable energy power plant should combine with some proportion storage. And that means that in future, maybe we don't have just the solar farm, and maybe in future each power plant could be solar and BESS. And according to following this diagram, and we can see the accumulative installation of storage is growing very quickly. I think maybe this is the trend in future, you know, and maybe wind farm with BESS and solar farm with BESS to generate a smooth output, same output to the green. That is the preferable. So far, and for the, if we are talking about the solar and the BESS combined together power plant, I think currently we have two technical solutions. One is the DC coupling solution, another one is the AC coupling solution. For DC coupling solution, we can look at this diagram. From this diagram, and we can see this is the typical diagram for the DC coupling solution. And the solar and the BESS share the inverter station. It means, and we don't need to store additional PCS station. It means the solar and the BESS just share the same part. So it means that we can pass down, we can save this part. Another advantage of the DC coupling solution is that it has the higher efficiency, because we know the excessive energy from solar can charge into the battery directly. So it doesn't go through other equipment. And so this is the reason and why it has the higher efficiency. But for the DC coupling solution, so far it only works for solar farm. For other energy power plant, for other energy source that is not feasible. So for other energy power plant, maybe we need to consider use the AC coupling solution. AC coupling solution is also an additional coupling solution. And because they connect at the AC bus bar, so it means that the BESS is totally independent with the other energy source. I mean, such like the thermal power plant, the hydro power plant, the wind farm, solar farm, they are totally independent. So it's very flexible. So we can install the capacity as we want. Because we know currently maybe the cost of the BESS is still very high. Maybe after a few years, then we consider to install the battery system, and then we can use the AC coupling solution because they are independent. It's flexible to do this. Another advantage of the AC coupling solution is that it can do ancillary service for the green, and no matter daytime or nighttime, it can do the service for the grid. So this is the DC and AC solution. Another thing we want to introduce is the system voltage. And because, currently for solar farm, we know for utility project and most project of solar plant, we use the 1500 system voltage. That's because the 1500 has the big advantage, and it can cost down, it can improve the efficiency, it can lower the OCLE. So we can see most projects adopt the 1500 system voltage. So I think maybe the BESS can borrow some experience from the solar. I think for BESS, and we can use the 1500 also, because this indeed can reduce the cost and improve the efficiency, which is very useful for our investor. And currently, and for utility, no matter solar or BESS and Sungrow, both provide the 1500 system solution. And you can see this is some reference from Sungrow. The second part, I want to introduce the product and solution part. But firstly, I think maybe I introduced a little bit more about the application of the BESS. We give 4 applications, but today I just want to talk about the on-grid application. It doesn't include the off-grid application. I mean, for microgrid application, although Sungrow have the solution to do that, but for this application, it's just mainly for on-grid application. So the first scenarios and is the DC power clipping recapture. That means that because for some solar plant at noon, because at noon the sunlight is very strong. So in this case, and it will have the clipping. So the clipping part, if we have the BESS system, the clipping part can charge into the battery, and then we can discharge at another time. And the second scenario and is the renewable energy capacity firming. And for this application, and we know because, as I said before, and the output of the renewable power plant is not stable. So if we install some BESS system, and then we can smooth the output and guarantee a stable output. The third scenario is ancillary service support, like the frequency regulation, the voltage regulation. And the last one is energy shifting. For energy shifting, and for example, if we don't have big load at the morning, so it means the energy from solar we can store and discharge at another time, like the night, like the afternoon. So this is the energy shifting. But currently, under current policy in Philippines, I think maybe renewable energy firming and ancillary service can have the benefits. So the first one for renewable energy firming, and we can see this is the diagram, and a typical diagram for this application. The requirements is from 12 a.m. to 8 p.m. and we need to generate stable renewable electricity. So this is the requirement, this is the demand. And so, we installed solar and BESS. So it means that before 12 a.m., all energy generated by solar should be charged into the battery, right? So it comes to 12 a.m. So from 12 a.m., then we start feed energy into the grid. But at this time, the sunlight is still very strong, so it may have the clipping. So the clipping part from the solar will charge into the battery also. And then it comes to 3 p.m. So after 3 p.m. and then the sunlight is going down, and from 4 p.m. and then we start to discharge energy from the battery until 8 p.m. So it means that during these 8 hours, and we can generate stable, renewable electricity to grid. I think it's preferable by grid, no matter NGCP or Miracle, they may like to buy this electricity because this is the green electricity and this is the stable. So I think this is the one scenario and we could use in Philippines. And now you can see this is the typical diagram and for the system. According to our calculation and investigation, and we thought a 2-hour system to 8-hour system is feasible in Philippines in these applications. Another one I want to talk about is the ancillary service for the grid, because and more and more renewable energy connect with the grid because they can't do ancillary service for the grid. No matter wind farm, solar farm, they can't do that service. So in this case, if we just use the traditional generator like the thermal generator or hydro power plant, maybe they don't have the ability to do this, to do for example, like the frequency regulation. And we can see this diagram. This is the typical diagram, and we have conduct in our power plant. And you can see the left diagram and the red curve is the AGC demands, and the black curve is the output of a traditional generator output. And we can see the traditional generator can't respond very quickly and accurate to follow the demand, follow the AGC, because the response time is very low, very slow. But if we use the BESS to do this, and we can see, and the response curve is very well, and because one of the advantages of BESS is it can charging and discharging very quickly, so it can follow the demands very well, and then we can use this application, and we can use BESS to do frequency regulation to guarantee the green frequency is very stable. Actually, we have do many projects about this. So far in England, and the biggest storage system is a 100 megawatt hour project. Use this BESS to do the frequency regulation, and the BESS system is offered by Sungrow. and that is the biggest one in Europe, so far in Europe. And in Philippines, we think maybe 1 hour, according to the PGC, and we think maybe 1 hour system is recommended. And we can use the 1 hour system to do the reserve regulation and contingency regulation to do service for the grid. Now you can see this is the 3D model of SunGrow container solution. And the left part is PCS station, and normally it includes the PCS transformer switchgear in one container. And this is the battery container. It includes the battery, the BCP, LC, HVAC, FSS, and all the equipment is the integrated inside the battery container. So what we offer is the package solution. What we offer is the turnkey solution for customer. And one more thing we want to clarify is that SunGrow pay many energy and big attention to safety. And the safety is very important for BESS. And we have 3 levels protection. And the first level is prevention. And because we will do the cooling design very well, and we will select the high quality battery cell and the precious the BMS. And so far we cooperate with the Samsung SDI and the CATL battery brand to guarantee the battery quality. And the second is protection. Second level, because if it has some issues, it has some problems, and for example, like the overcurrent, short circuit current, and then at the DC and AC side, we have protection for that. And we also have the arc protection for the system to prevent from burning. And the third level is suppression. In case that we have fire issues, we have fire problems, we have our firefighting system, and we have a gas firefighting system and water solution. It's up to the clients. So this solution guarantees the so far in our projects that's the 0 incident in our project. And we also care about the cooling performance. But we also do 3-stage design. The first is structural design. So normally we will start our structural design, we will do the calculation. And then the second, we will simulate via software in our platform, and then we can generate a result. And the third level is then we will do the real product testing in our lab, and to confirm and verify the design is capable and feasible. So with our design and what we can guarantee, and we can guarantee the internal temperature of container is 23 plus minus 5. And we also can guarantee the battery cell temperature difference is less than 3, and the rack difference is less than 5. So with this design, then we can guarantee between each battery module, each battery racks, temperature mismatch is very low. So low mismatch means that we can discharge more energy. We can discharge out more energy. The last one I want to introduce is about the active maintenance for our system. And we also have 3 levels. And the first is for the battery container. For battery container, and we adopt the high pressure, the BMS. And the BMS will record the status of a battery module and the battery rack. It means the information such as the voltage, current, SOC, SOH, temperature will be recorded and monitored and submitted to SCADA system. And the second is DC cable determination. Means the detection. We will use our algorithm to detect if it has any disconnection or looseness in the DC side. So if it has, and the system will receive an alarm, then all the people can come to site to check. The last part about the PCS, all key components inside PCS is monitored in real time. It means that the IGBT, the ACB, the fan, the fuse, the reactor is monitored by real time. So if it has any problems or any failures, then we will know, and the system will give out a potential cause, and then we can arrange people, and then we can judge and determine, and then arrange people come to site to do the repair work or replacement to save our maintenance time. So this is our active maintenance. The last part, I want to take a little bit time to introduce the SunGrow. Actually, SunGrow is dedicated to renewable energy industry over 24 years. And so far, we already installed in the worldwide over 154 gigawatts. And in Philippines, we already installed more than 700 megawatts. And you can see this is our 10 business, but so far, only 4 of them have presence in Philippines. And that is their PV inverter, investment and development, energy storage system, and floating. SunGrow possesses the largest factory, and so far the production capacity is 19 gigawatt per year. And we have 2 factories, one is in China, another one is in India. But this year we will build another factory in Thailand to service the Asian and the Pacific region. We also can offer the 6 gigawatt hour for ESS. And you can see, and this is our local warehouse and the local service in Philippines and our local service team. Actually, since 2015, and we start to build our local service team in Philippines to guaranteeing the service for our clients. Last year, we shipped out the best more than 800 megawatt hour. This year, I think we can do more than 1.5 gigawatt hour. So I think this is the big market. And since many countries released the policy about carbon neutrality, I think for us, this is a good challenge, a good opportunity, a great opportunity for us to involve with the renewable energy industry. This is all of my presentation, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gary, for the information sharing. And now let's go ahead and start the Q&A session. So during our attendees registration, we have collected and selected the most asked questions here for our speakers to share more of their opinions. So let's start with the first question for Mr. Dennis Quintero. What is the incentive policy for energy storage market in successful market? Any lessons can be learned for Philippines?
Yes, thank you, Shan, for that question. There are incentives that are provided under the Philippine Renewable Energy Act for e- electricity storage systems. And that would include incentives like an income tax holiday, duty-free importation of renewable energy capital equipment, special realty tax rates, net operating loss carryover, a special corporate income tax after the expiration of the income tax holiday. Other incentives like accelerated depreciation, 0% value added tax, tax exemption on carbon credits, tax credit on domestic capital equipment and services, exemption from universal charge, and the option to pay transmission and wheeling charges on a per kilowatt basis. So there are indeed incentives that are already in place under Philippine laws and regulations for energy storage projects. Now another incentive that we can take note of, although this is only a potential incentive. I have spoken earlier about the development of the downstream nickel sector here in the Philippines. Basically, for the processing of nickel ore into battery-grade materials to be used in the manufacture of batteries. The national government is encouraging the nickel mining companies to build nickel processing plants, and there is a proposal that was floated around with respect to an additional tax that may be imposed on on mining companies that that only export direct shipping ore abroad. There is this proposal from some sectors in the government to impose an additional royalty on mining companies that do not process onshore or here in the Philippines. But the proposal is to exempt those nickel mining companies who undertake processing here in the Philippines from the additional royalty. So that's still being discussed between the government and the industry. It's not certain that such additional royalty will be imposed by the government. It can be the new mining fiscal regime could be by way of a law in Congress that, let's say, tax any windfall profits of mining companies in periods of very high metal prices. But that's a proposed additional tax and a proposed incentive to companies that would process their metals here in the Philippines, which would include the processing of nickel ore to battery grade materials and even batteries.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis, for answering this question. And now the next one is for Mr. Gary Gao. So what will the cost of BESS be in the next 5 to 10 years? And what is your forecast of its position be in the Philippines energy market?
Okay. I think this is a big question, but actually, in the past decade, the electricity cost of solar power plants has dropped by 18 to 19%. And the electricity cost of gas has dropped by 80%. But according our prediction, we thought and might still have 40% space for cost reduction. So I think this is a good sign for the system, and we know, although in short time and they maybe have the fluctuation, and currently the raw material is going right, growing, and the price is growing, and but the trend is going down. And I think maybe around 2023 and 2024. And in the future, I think doesn't have the, like as I said, it doesn't have the wind farm power plant or solar farm power plant. In the future, there should be combination, multiple energy combination, like the solar with the best, the wind with the best, or like the thermal power plant, hydropower plant combined with the best or solar. And that is the multiple energy source that will work together to provide the stable electricity to the grid. And actually, maybe after 2 or 3 years, and then at that time, the cost of the electricity cost of solar and gas integration power plant will be lower than the thermal power plant, lower than the traditional power plant. So we think that's the big opportunity, and because since the more and more country make promise and they release the policy about the carbon neutrality, and I think in future many countries that will follow this policy, because the greenhouse issue is our common issues, and we need to address this for our next generation. And considering for the electricity, I think this is the big market for us, and it also brings the big challenge for us to the future. But I believe we have a confidence and with this in future, the renewable energy industry is good, and because we all prefer the green electricity, and like Sangro vision, and we believe and we want to provide green power for all. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary, for sharing your opinion. And next question is for Mr. Ari Natividad. So what do you think is the best suitable model for Philippines? CNI energy storage, or grid-side energy storage, or renewable farm plus energy storage?
Thanks, Xian. I think all these models are suitable for the Philippines. I think all these models should be pursued as well. So for CNI storage, I'm doing that. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's trying to do that. Grid-side energy storage, we already know that San Miguel has done a big announcement and all these things with NGCP, I think. For renewable farm plus energy storage, this is pretty much also very and should be pursued, because solar is still intermittent. So energy storage would really help on that. And to answer also the question for all the speakers, interpretation of future solar market trend, I think it's going to be very positive. As it's been mentioned a couple of times already, the prices have gone down for solar, the acceptance has gone up. Between solar, wind, and hydro, solar would be the least technically challenged to do. Also, there's a lot of project finance, whether it's local or abroad for it. So I think I think it, and then just the positioning, the geographic location, we should take advantage of that. So I think the future is good. I feel very positive about it.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Ari. And Dennis and Gary, would you like to also share your opinions on the last questions? What's your interpretation of the future solar market trend in Philippines? Yeah, I think Mr. Dennis, you're on mute.
Hi, Ari. Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree with Ari that that there is a very bright future for solar and renewable energy in the Philippines. If some of you may recall that back in 2016, at the start of the current administration, the policy was sort of neutral between thermal and renewable energy power, but more specifically in 2020, the Philippine government has declared a moratorium on the approval of new thermal power projects. Those that have been previously approved are not covered by this moratorium, but that only underlines the attitude of the national government in promoting renewable energy, including solar. I think a vision for the Philippines would be to have what could be said as an integrated solar market. So, so from my discussion, I talked about the raw materials that are available here in the Philippines for renewable energy systems, like copper and gold, as well as raw materials for batteries, specifically nickel. I think a vision would be an integrated solar market where PV panels are manufactured here. Philippines becoming a manufacturing hub because of the availability and of the supply of these key metals needed for renewable energy systems, and then also for the building of battery manufacturing facilities here, because the Philippines already has the competitive advantage that it has the material, the key materials that are needed to make these batteries, whether for electric vehicles, for data centers, or for utility scale energy storage.
For the market in Philippines, I'm agreed with Mr. Dennis and Mr. Ray. And actually, the Philippines has a large population and a huge electricity demand, and it also has the good sunlight, the natural condition to develop the renewable energy power plant. I think this is the very, very good. And Sungrow, since as I said, since 2015, Sungrow has built up the local service team in Philippines. Actually, last year, Sungrow moved the repair center of Asian Pacific and our global hotline center to Philippines. Last year, we all moved to Philippines. That's because we think Philippines is a very important market, and because all people in Philippines can speak English, and Philippine people is very friendly, and they can communicate very well with our customers. And we have confidence, and we believe it, and the Philippine market will grow very quickly, and will absorb many investors to Philippines to do projects. Yeah.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks again, Dennis and Ari, for the great presentation and your opinion sharings today. And now I would like to go ahead and move to the lottery session. So the gift cards winner for today are Romer from Vena Energy Philippines, Marcus from Mainstream Renewable Power, Camilo from Net Solar Incorporated, Franz from ERC, Kenneth from First Gen Corporation, Jose from AC Energy, Penera from Fluence Energy, Jenny from Surya Source Energy, Ellie from Filipinas Shell Petroleum Corporation, and Trisha from Total Energies. Congratulations, and our team will get in touch with you after the webinar. And thanks again, everyone, for joining our webinar for today. And we appreciate all speakers' great support and valuable comments for this market. So if you have any other questions that were not answered during the webinar, please also feel free to contact us through the email address showing on the slides right now. And also we will share the recordings and the PowerPoint slides used by our speakers for today's webinar to your registration email by next week. And thanks again for attending our webinar for today, and we'll see you next time.